I don't care if it's a week, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. Who do we appreciate? LeBron James. That's who y'all gotta start appreciating. And you gotta stop disrespecting this man. You got AJ Brown, who's a legit number one, and you got Julio, who's a legit number one. One of them dudes gotta get double teamed. Who gonna get double teamed? And whoever gets double teamed, the other one gets the ball. I'm saying this with no pun intended, but full of pride.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Prideful podcast. As always, it's your boy Pride, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have an author, a writer and director, and overall NFL fan and historian, Jackson Michael. How are you doing today, sir? How are you?
Hey, great. Happy to be here, and always love to chat football.
And first and foremost, thank you for being here. You know what I mean? I definitely do appreciate this. And to start it off, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, obviously you have all these accolades and all these projects you have done, but let us know about not only that stuff, but also the human that is Jackson Michael.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up around Packer fan and loved the Packers as a kid, and also loved the Cowboys and the John Elway Broncos. But I really got into music as a teenager, and I started playing guitar as a teenager, and moved to Austin, Texas after I graduated high school, a couple of years after I graduated high school, and was a professional musician for a long time. I still play around with the guitar and a lot of other instruments, and do some recording too. That helped me get into podcasting. And I like hiking. My wife and I, we live with our 2 rescue dogs just outside of San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I tried hiking once. I couldn't do it. I'll be honest with you. I tapped so quick, man. So it's kind of funny every time I usually hear people and they say, "Oh yeah, I went hiking." I always find it interesting because when it comes to hiking, what do you really like about it? Is it just the fact that you're kind of out there? Is it the physical stuff you like? Like what is the appeal with hiking?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's getting out in nature, and I really enjoy nature. I really enjoy kind of looking at a tree and knowing the species, what it is, seeing animals, kind of watching their behaviors. I'll tell you what, man, squirrels are the most athletic creatures there are. If you haven't appreciated squirrels, because we see them so often, just take a look at them. They are quick. They can jump. Put a squirrel on my team. Give him the ball.
Right there, I'm just going. He'll. It's almost as if squirrels can just run forever.
They can, yeah. So but the other thing, is just it's you see some beautiful sights that you don't see just in the city or on the road, and I love being in the city too. But we just we took a trip to Oregon. We did some hiking in Oregon off the coast. I mean, it was just phenomenal. It was beautiful.
Yeah. I will say this: nature definitely is beautiful. Especially when you're being able to be out there and just by yourself, just relaxing and just breathing it in. I know that's definitely a nice calming exercise. But you are a man who has done a lot, right? Like, obviously we're gonna get into all of it. You have written a book, The Game Before the Money, Voices of the Men Who Built the NFL. What gave you the inspiration to write this book? And while you were writing it, was it like a process where it's just like you just sat down and just wrote it all? Or did you have to do it in increments, meaning like you would have to wait until you could think of something and felt in the moment to write it?
Yeah, so The Game Before the Money it's an oral history of players who played between the 1930s and the 1970s, and the University of Nebraska Press published So I did a lot of interviews with players. I did 40 interviews for that book. A lot of research, and that is pretty much the two major parts of writing, I think, are research and editing, more than, especially with nonfiction, because you just have to organize the information in a way that people can understand clearly. And what inspired me to do it was, in the 1960s, there was a guy that did an oral history of baseball, and he tracked down guys who had played with like Ty Cobb in the 20s, and for like John McGraw. And I thought somebody really needs to do that for football. I didn't know it was me, I just kind of happened into it. I had the idea for a long time. I was playing a gig, I was playing at a party, and I met Robert Hurst, who we lost a few months ago. He's since passed away. But he was the official artist for the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. And he had said that he knew Night Train Lane when Night Train was alive. And I was like, oh, wow, I really would have loved to meet him, to have met him and kind of record some of his stories, because I have this, idea. And Robert said, man, that's a great idea. Would you like to go to Bob Lilly's golf tournament in a couple of weeks? And, I'll introduce you to some players. And I was like, yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm forever grateful for Robert and him opening that door for me. I met Ken Houston there. I met Elvin Bethea there. I met Walt Garrison there, and everything kind of started from there. And after that, it was tracking guys down, and it went bigger than I ever imagined.
Right. And I mean, like you said, like if you really ask somebody to actually sit down and say, hey, do you know anyone who actually kind of has done like you said, like an oral history of the game of football, it's this weird thing where like not a lot of people kind of really would have thought anything, like they kind of would have been struggling. Like I know there's some on soccer. I've heard a few, like you said, in baseball. Heck, I even think there's a couple out there about hockey, and it's kind of interesting. Like, you don't really realize that no one had done it about football until you finally have seen someone do it. And that's when it kind of comes to like, this, I haven't really done it when it came to the NFL. While writing, were you kind of going out and looking for people? Is some of the stuff kind of like in like secondhand, or is it just everything you wrote is kind of how you interpreted it?
Yeah, it was. I recorded the interviews and just pretty much edited it for the interview parts. Then I wrote timelines in between each kind of section by decade, and that kind of bridged the player's story with what was happening both in the NFL, at pro football, and our country. And through it all, I always now say that football history is American history, because you had so many people from different backgrounds, different interests, and they all come together, to play probably the greatest team sport, where you have the most dependency on your teammates, and they all come together. And it was great. And the other thing is, I had a Milwaukee Braves hat on it before. I'll put it back on, because I got this because I love Hank Aaron, right? Hank Aaron's my favorite all-time players. And it's really easy to find, information about Hank Aaron, and he grew up in Alabama, and you know, and you know a lot about baseball players. If you want to learn about Babe Ruth or Maury Wills or whoever, you know, that stuff is generally easy to find. If you want to know the background of like Frank Gifford or Bart Starr or you know, I mean, that's a lot harder to find. And so yeah, so that's kind of where I really felt like it needed to be done. And now I just keep doing it through the podcast. And I also wrote a book called Red, White, and Columbia Blue, Chasing the Dream with the 1979 Houston Oilers. And that was a little bit different in that I was writing a lot more of the narrative in that. So it's two different things, but both required a lot of research.
Yeah, especially when, like, you know, if you're going that far back in time, you definitely have to do the research, and you definitely have to find the right people. But you did mention, you know, your podcast. You know, you have two of them, Texas Sports Hall of Fame and The Game Before the Money. What are some of the behind the scenes things? Like when you go and talk, is it more like a, oh yeah, off the cuff type of thing? Do you guys kind of rather stay in one specific realm in terms of history? Like let us know like the entire process of your podcast.
Yeah, so a lot of the interviews are done over the phone. Sometimes they're done at autograph shows. Like I interviewed Drew Pearson for the Texas Sports Hall of Fame at an autograph show. And yeah, it was really off the cuff. And you know, he was really generous with his time and his stories. And you know, so but again, it takes I'll tell you a great story from that Drew Pearson interview. And again, I can't underscore it enough how much research is important. I was researching. There were several people that I wanted to talk to at this autograph show, and I had a media badge from TriStar Productions, and I was doing research with Drew Pearson. I knew he had played quarterback in college. I was doing research on him, and I thought, I wonder if he threw any touchdown passes or if he threw any passes in the pros.
Right.
And then it was one of those moments where I was like, you know what? I'm just going down a rabbit hole. This is, you know, am I putting too much time and effort into this? But I went and I looked. I saw he threw 3 touchdown passes in the NFL. And, you know, lo and behold, about 10 minutes into our conversation, he goes, hey, you know, I threw 3 touchdown passes in the NFL. And was able to name the 3 players he threw them to.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, there was another time when I interviewed Carl Eller for The Game Before the Money, and I looked at the box score for the game where Jim Marshall ran the ball the wrong way, and I found out that famous game. Well, Carl Eller.
It's kind of funny because every time I remember him celebrating. You kind of see like everyone on the sideline pulling the wrong way. His own teammates are trying to like do the chase down and stop him. Like, oh man, it's funny.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a hilarious moment in sports, you know, that people get a lot of laughs out of. But I looked at the box score of that game, and Carl Eller had recovered a fumble and ran for a touchdown right before that.
So, if I'm mistaken, they had scored a thing like, I want to say it was like what, 4 or 5 plays literally right before, like
right before that.
Yeah, it was literally right before. Like,
and when I asked Carl Eller about that, he was like, "Wow, you know, you really know that you really are a student of the game." I remember him saying that. So what it does is it really builds a rapport with athletes, I think, when you know their background that well before going in. And that's one of the reasons why research is so important.
Oh yeah. It definitely is critical, especially when, like you said, a lot of the things that it's always good to have that back pocket information, because the thing is when they bring it up, you, instead of just looking at them and go, you can continue that conversation and show them, and it's like, hey, look, I wasn't just dropped here to talk, like you doing that research kind of does show a little bit, like, I care, and
it does,
yeah.
Yeah.
And that actually, just that little bit of extras makes somebody who, in their very first conversation, kind of looks at you and goes, okay, he does care. He actually does want to talk to me. He wasn't just thrown here for no reason. So it then kind of makes the rest of the conversation, like easier and more fluid, to the point where everyone's enjoying themselves,
Yeah, that's it. And you're prepared to hear some of that stuff too. And you're better prepared as the interviewer, and it's just it just kind of makes it a little bit more special. It ended up, Carl Eller told a great story too. And you got it kind of brought out a little bit more about that Jim Marshall play, because we get so many laughs off of it.
Right.
Well, Eller said that when Jim Marshall picked up the ball and started running, he thought to himself, God darn it, Marshall's going to have a longer touchdown than I had.
And it's kind of funny because in the end, like, on a technicality, he did, but at the same time, he ran the wrong way. So
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, like that. Honestly, like that's funny, and it's funny because I kind of stumbled onto that play because I was like, growing up, right? Sometimes I'd just be bored. I'd just be on YouTube, and I would just be looking up, like NFL highlights and stuff. I'll go to sleep. I would always wake up to like something completely different from what I started. Like one day I went to sleep watching football, and I woke up on some weird National Geographic thing about how ants make their little that little underground burrow things, like the little ant holes. I woke up somehow to like that, and it was legit National Geographic because I saw the symbol. But I remember one day I woke up, and it's kind of funny because it ended up being like an NFL blooper type of thing, and I saw that play, and I remember watching it, and the first thing that came to mind was, I feel bad because no one really will remember if they won or lost. No one really is going to remember what happened before or after. Like, for all we know, the most phenomenal play in the history of the NFL could have happened literally right before, and nobody really would remember because when Jim Marshall picks it up, and again, especially if you look at it, it's very rare for a defensive end to get the opportunity to like, score a touchdown, right? Now, if you double down on that to score a touchdown on the, like, for the other, you know what I mean? Like, just to go to the opposite end zone is kind of funny. So I always felt bad because it's like, for all we know, it could have been the best play, like, right before, you know what I mean? Like, it could have been like a pre-Odell, you know what I mean? Like Odell Beckham Jr. It could have been someone else who did a catch even better. He jumped in the air, he spread his legs, and he backwards caught it one-handed in between his legs, got down. That could have happened, but nobody would know because that game is notorious for him.
The highlight everybody picks.
Right, and
there's a great story. There was a guy, I think it was in the Rose Bowl many years before that, who had done the same thing. I think his name was Roy Regals, and he called Jim Marshall up after the game, and he said, "Welcome to the club." Dude. That did it, but you're right. It's kind of those things, and I talked about it in the Oilers book, because the 1979 AFC Championship game had this very controversial call Mike Renfro, the Oilers receiver, was called out of bounds on a pass that would have tied the game. And everybody who talks about that game and the Oilers from that time, it comes right down to that one play. They talk about the Renfro play. And, it turns out, that the Oilers beat the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. It was a huge deal. They won a playoff game on the road against the number 1 seed in the AFC, Chargers. And the Oilers didn't have Earl Campbell that game. He was injured. They didn't have Dan Pastorini, their starting quarterback. He was injured. And they didn't have Kenny Burrow, their top receiver. And he was injured. And their safety, Vernon Perry, set an all-time playoff record, which is still a record. He made 4 interceptions in that one game against the Chargers. But when you bring up the Oilers, and that season, it's that one highlight of the did he catch it? Did he not catch it? It's kind of the same thing about with Jim Marshall, what you were talking about that play. And with Jim Marshall, people forget that the Vikings actually won that game. So
and that's the thing, and that kind of goes to the point I was saying is like, people don't tend to really remember what happened before or after. It's just that one play that's kind of, you know what I mean? Like if you ask somebody who won the game, a lot of people would say, I don't care. You saw Jim Marshall run the wrong way. Like that's kind of how that game is. You know what I mean? Like, that's really how it is. So it is funny because like you said, they ended up winning. So in the end, it's kind of a good thing because you can kind of poke fun at it because at the end of the day they won. But I guarantee you, in that moment on the sideline, because it was funny because you see him on the sideline and he like kind of left his helmet on for a minute. Like he kind of was just like, "Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me." Like he, you know what I mean? Like he was like. And again, if I was him, I would have done the same thing. I probably wouldn't have went up there and just left the stadium because me personally, I would have been mortified for like probably a week. You know what I mean? But you did bring up earlier. You brought up you being a like the whole podcast thing. But the same thing in that realm of media, you're actually a writer and director of We Are the Oilers, the Love Ya Blue era. Take us through the experience of actually making it, actually writing and directing it, because you did both things. Take us through the process of it, and was this harder than writing the book, or did it come a little easier, or which was harder?
I think writing the book was harder. Doing the documentary, it presented its own challenges. We were really lucky in that the Super Bowl was going to be in Houston that year, and we were able to get a cable network. They're now called AT&T Sportsnet. They were called Root Sports Southwest at the time, and they committed to broadcasting it. So we put it together in about 4 or 5 months. I think September, maybe we got the confirmation for it, and then it was on air in January, of course. So and it was great. It was different doing several interviews at once. We did several at Dan Pastorini's golf tournament because a lot of the players were there. So we filmed a lot of the interviews at once there. And then there were a couple others that we picked up later at another event. But yeah, I mean, the experience was great. And I got, you get to know the players as more than being players. And that's one of the things that, I try to convey in the books, on the podcast, and in the documentary. besides, them as football players and getting the backstories to, like, the great plays and stuff, it's like, well, who are these guys? What are their personalities like? Like I said, you've got people from all different, grew up in all their families did all kinds of different professions. They grew up in all kinds of, some grew up in the country, some grew up in the city, all kinds of stuff. Some were wealthy, some were not. All kinds of to know kind of people, and especially seeing them when they're older and they've had time. That's a great experience as well, because you can pick up a lot from your elders. I'll say that you learn a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the thing is when you, because I've looked into the movie, and or the documentary, what I have noticed is it's more of a secondhand telling that kind of peels the layer back. You know what I mean? That kind of gives a fresh new perspective, because and some people were, when I was watching it, a lot of people, don't really, understand that, while making it, like, when you make something like this, right? It's a little difficult, because when you're retelling a history, you kind of, you need to come at it from a different angle, so to speak. You know what I mean? Because the history will always be there, but if you can have like a fresh face or a kind of a retelling or something like that, that kind of makes it different and unique, it will be able to, it'll kind of have a little bit more appeal while making it. Was there at any point, because I know there's no like highlights or anything like that, while making it, were you like dead set on not using it, or were you just along the lines of, well, we'll see if we even need it, let's work with what we got and go from there?
Oh, we would have used all kinds of highlights if we could have. It is really difficult and expensive to get the rights from NFL films. And we talked to them, and it was just way out of our budget. That said, the Titans ownership was very kind to us about using the logo, and using certain images. But getting the clearance for video rights, that is very difficult to do. It's very expensive to do. I'll say that. In fact, for the highlights that we wanted to use, the grand total came to more than what we had put into, making the film. So it was out of necessity. So, but that said, I really like what we did, and a lot of times, not having budget to get something like highlights, it forces you to be creative and do what you can. And it also allowed us to give more screen time, to the players, telling their stories, and and giving them a little extra spotlight.
Right, yeah, because like I said, this, if you watch it, it really is, you get to see, because a lot of guys, you always see, when you see a guy, think of any player, you think of the Bart Starr, the Jerry Rices, the T.O.s, you just think of the position. You know what I mean? Like, this documentary, it kind of peels back, and you kind of do hear them, and a lot of, especially for people who grew up watching them, it definitely does make you look at them not as a player, but as a human, which is something that athletes, no matter the era, no matter what era, no matter what sport, just athletes in general, that's something they kind of, they're not really lucky enough to have. But speaking of athletes, there is a very special story you wanted to touch upon. You have met that man, Drew Brees. Please explain the story, because when you touched on it in the emails, and I'm very excited for this one.
Yeah, it's actually pretty. It's a fun story, and it's also very profound. When it's all said and done, when you know the ending. But yeah, when Drew Brees was in high school, he came into this deli that I worked at fairly regularly. It was called Jason's Deli. And when I got to Austin, I took that job. I didn't have, I just moved there. I needed a job. So I ended up working there. And yeah, I can remember him, wearing his leather jacket. They won the state championship when he was quarterback and as a senior. And I also remember him coming in with his Purdue. He had a Purdue hat on, and he had mentioned that he was going to Purdue, and I had said, "Oh, I grew up in a Big Ten city. I grew up in Madison." And I was like, "Yeah, so you'll be playing in my hometown. The Big Ten is great. They'll be awesome." And the funny thing about it is, because he was in high school then, and nobody knew what was going to happen. I remember him leaving, watching him walk out of the deli that day, and thinking to myself, "Golly, I'm going to watch to see if that kid ever plays." Because which is so funny now when you think about it, but a lot of kids get college scholarships and they don't end up playing.
Right.
Or maybe they'll just play their senior year. I mean, he was playing as a sophomore. I remember I was at a party, and this story is pretty funny too. I was at a party with some coworkers. I was working at a different job then, and everybody was watching the Alamo Bowl, and Drew Brees took his helmet off, and I said, "That's that kid from the deli." And everybody was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, that kid used to come into Jason's Deli when I worked there." But yeah, I mean, he had, it's phenomenal to think about, the career he had. And, at the time he was just a kid in high school. And, Nick Foles also went to that high school. It's a little bit of trivia there. Nick Foles went to that high school. So did Justin Tucker. And I haven't really checked on this fact, but I would be willing to say that Drew Brees and Nick Foles are probably the only two Super Bowl winning starting quarterbacks from the same high school. I don't think that's ever happened.
Yeah, honestly, because that's something. Wow.
It really, if there's another set of quarterbacks from the same high school that won
probably
the
has to
Super
be
Bowl,
like, it has to be like way back. It had to be like way back.
Yeah, and even then, it would be very. Now Joe Ferguson, who was a quarterback in the 1970s, I know that he was the quarterback, and Terry Bradshaw were the quarterbacks at the same high school, and one of them followed the other. I can't remember who played after whom, but you wouldn't want to be in that high school district as an opponent. When they've got Terry Bradshaw and then Joe Ferguson. And Joe Theismann was quarterback at South River High School in New Jersey. And then Drew Pearson was a quarterback after that. So they were on a pretty good run there too. But as far as two starting quarterbacks, Super Bowl champions being from the same high school, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So obviously, you're a man with high intelligence. So I want to get your takes on some of the storylines that's happening this day and age and what I call the amalgamation that is the NFL, right? Because for some unknown reason, you know what I mean? Like, look, man, we live in a league where somehow the Jags can beat the Bills, who's a legit Super Bowl team, 9-6, right? So this whole season has been crazy, right?
It
One of
has.
the craziest oh, go ahead.
Well, one thing, if you look through NFL history, this is something that my friend Glenn and I, who have watched sports together for a long time, have noticed. It tends to be weeks 9 through 12 in the NFL. If you look over history, those are kind of some weeks where some crazy things are prone to happen. Those seem to be weeks where really, really good teams like the Bills drop a game to a team that's been doing poorly all season, like the Jaguars. And it happens. The Cowboys would sometimes in their heyday lose around like week 10, 11, or 12, and it'd be a head scratcher.
Right.
I don't know if now they have bye weeks. I don't know if it's fatigue. I don't know if it's, the other team is, when you're the Bills, everybody's coming at you every week. And,
right.
They definitely got the Jaguars defense their best day. The Jaguars, they were on their best day. Defensively. And so when you get that every week, I mean, it's tough. I mean, these are pro level players. And that expression on any given Sunday, any team can beat another. But it does seem to be weeks 9 through 12. You can kind of look for something to happen.
Yeah, and honestly, like, because I have noticed that not specifically 9 through 12, but I kind of noticed in the beginning of the second half of the season is kind of where things happen. And what the only thing I can come up with is that's kind of when legit, at least championship contending teams kind of start to lull and just kind of get a little, we're just here for the playoffs. We're just here for the playoffs, which then kind of puts them in a position to come out playing against a horrible team, to come out flat and just come out like, just thinking, oh, this is going to be easy. And then they put themselves in a situation where they end up losing. But a team that's been surprising a lot of people, the Kansas City Chiefs, they have been riding this high for the last few years, and people expect them to continue riding the high for the next foreseeable future, for like the next, 2-3 years. The crash that they're having, should this really be a surprise?
I don't know if it should really be a surprise necessarily. I won't say that I expected it, but to play at that level for a long time throughout 2 or 3 seasons, if you look at the history of the AFC, there have only been 3 teams that have been able to win 3 conference championships in a row. It was the Dolphins in the 70s, and that included their 1972 undefeated team. Then the Bills, of course, in the 90s with 4 straight AFC championships, and then the Patriots with Tom Brady. So the Chiefs have already won back-to-back AFC championships. If they won a third, that would be absolutely remarkable. The other thing is you get everybody's best every week. I mean, especially when you're in the Chiefs position, winning 2 in a row. I think the Titans game, I think with that, and I think with the Bills game that they lost, those were the Bills and the Titans. 2 things. They were proving to themselves that they could beat them. But I think more than anything, I think the Bills and Titans wanted to say, you're going to have to respect us. We know we can beat you. and you know that we can beat you. And that's a big aspect of pro football too, I think. I'm having trouble hearing you.
I had myself muted.
Oh, there you go.
But it's this thing where we're gonna come at you, especially because right now the Chiefs are considered the big dogs, right? Like everyone is like they're chasing the Chiefs. What I think, and if you look at their schedule, they won against the Browns, they lost against the Ravens by a point, and it could have watching the game. It literally could have went either way. They lost to the Chargers. They beat the Eagles. They lost to the Bills. Then they ended up beating Washington, lost to the Titans, beat the Giants, beat the Packers. The thing is I think it's a thing of other teams are just getting better, and certain key players on those teams are getting better. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, the Chargers, they're not a team that, oh, yeah, in 2 or 3 years they'll be something. They're a team that you need to respect and worry about now, you know? The Bills, they got Stephon Diggs, and now Josh Allen has kind of taken every single year he's improved, every single year. So it's what I think it's really a combination of the Chiefs kind of thinking, you know, back to back AFCs. You know what I mean? Like, we've been to the Super Bowl, we won one, we lost another one, but at the same time we lost it to Tom Brady, and also our offensive line was injured, and on top of that, Patrick Mahomes kind of was trying to carry them, and there was some plays kind of broke down because of the line. Other times the receivers couldn't catch anything. But I'm looking at it, and it's like the teams that they lost to are teams that I'm not surprised they lost to. You know, because again, they lost to the Ravens, which Ravens people think is a legit team. And like I said, it was by 1 point. Yeah, and it was a very close game, you know. So it's not like they were just blown out of the water. Lost to the Chargers, which again is a quality team. Same thing with the Bills. So I'm not panicking. I am kind of worried about their defense, which, you know, if we're going to be honest, is not the best defense in the world. It's a defense that, frankly, like right now they're tied for 27th, which they've been up. You know, they've somehow been trending up the last few weeks, which I don't know how that's even possible. But right now they're above the Texans, Dolphins, Jets, Lions, and they're tied with the Washington football team. So the question I have for you is, with the way that the Chiefs have been playing defensively so poorly, like, do you think it's possible that if the Chiefs is a bottom tier defense, do you think this offense could bail them out?
Well, I do think that conversely, I do think that the defense of the Chiefs could be the one that bails them out. You know, it was their front seven that made such a huge difference in their win. That team knows how to win, and this is what the Chiefs have coming into the playoffs if they make it. That knows how to win big games. They know how to win playoff games. They know how to. And that defense knows how to bend and not break, and how to make plays at the right time in big games. They're going to have that advantage over everybody else. So I do think, yes, their offense could bail them out. Mahomes knows how to win those games. And look, here's the other thing too. They've been in the trenches with Mahomes. They know that they can win big games with him at quarterback. They know they can win the Super Bowl with him at quarterback. That makes a ton of difference when you step on that field and you've got another quarterback and you think you can win. You think you can win that game. But when you know that quarterback's already won these games, well, there's a different level of confidence from what I understand from players that I've talked to. Oh, you're kind of, I think you're muted again, Ray.
I'm 0-2 right now. Jeez, like, I don't know, that's all because my kids, you know, they're a little squeamish, and I'm kind of worried that's gonna end up coming through the mic. But you are right. There is that aspect that people really aren't talking about. That Patrick Mahomes, they've won a Super Bowl with him. They believe in him, and they got that special tier faith that not only do they have faith in him, the faith has paid off for them with a Super Bowl. So that is true. Like you said, they've been down in the trenches with him. They believe in him. They think this is, but not think, they know this is their guy. This guy has delivered for them. So definitely, I do get where you're coming from. And only time will tell whether or not we will see if this offense can, because you and I both agree this is a very high powered, potent offense. So if there's any offense that can do it, it would be this one led by Patrick Mahomes.
It is, and again, playoff games are different than regular season games, and it's going to be different in the playoffs, and that's why I think if the Steelers find a way to get in the playoffs, they could go further than I think people would expect. So that's one thing, because you've got Tomlin, you've got Roethlisberger, and it's the same thing with the Chiefs, with Andy Reid, with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, those guys have won, and it does make a huge difference.
Yeah. Speaking of a huge difference, it's what this man is somehow still doing. Tom Brady, at the ripe old age of 44, somehow, some way, is playing phenomenally. But then the question is, I mean, clearly, I don't think there's ever been a quarterback at this age to be able to do it. But how does Tom Brady at 44 match up with history?
Yeah, so there have been a few quarterbacks that have played at 44. And in fact, George Blanda played a series or two at age 48 for the Raiders. That's the record. Warren Moon is the only other Hall of Famer besides George Blanda to have played quarterback at age 44. And Warren Moon was a backup with the Chiefs, I think, at that time. So nobody has really played a starting quarterback at this age. And obviously nobody has played at this level. That's what's amazing about it. A lot of the old guard will ask, well, if Johnny Unitas had the same protection as far as rules go, would he have been able to play another 4 or 5 years at a higher level? All that stuff is up for debate. But even if Sammy Baugh were to have been able to play at the level he was till the age of 45 or 48, it's still remarkable what Tom Brady is doing.
Yeah, it really is, because like you said, I mean, not only being a starter, but playing at a level that you have to not only keep him as a starter, you still have to game plan. Like, this isn't Tom Brady's not really being a game manager. He's still kind of doing what he does. He goes out, he understands, okay, this is what needs to be done this week, and then he goes and does it. Whether that means he's got to throw the ball 50 times or he has to throw the ball 20 times. We're still kind of seeing the same Tom Brady who kind of understands at the end of the day, we're here to get the win. What do I need to do? This is what I need to do. And he kind of does take that responsibility on himself. So, I mean, look, at 44 years old, eventually he's going to have to stop, right? Like, eventually. Like, Father Time is undefeated, right? He's, like the old cliche goes, if it's Tom against Father Time, unfortunately for Tom, Father Time has no energy. He's got an infinite amount of energy with an unlimited supply of timeouts. At what age do you think realistically Tom Brady can keep playing?
Well, he was quoted as saying a few weeks ago that he thinks he could play till 50 or 55, that his body would be in shape to do it. But then he said he didn't plan on playing that long. I get it that people want to play as long as they can. Brett Favre, and all the, going to the Jets and then Minnesota. I get it because you only get to do it for a certain amount of time in your life. And in fact, you speak to a lot of guys, they'll tell you NFL stands for not for long.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't blame him for wanting to play football and play in the Super Bowl, play in the NFL for as long as he can. He obviously loves the game to go through what he goes through. Said preparation wise, that's one of the things that Brady makes Brady, and his commitment to the team and to winning. That takes a lot of energy, and I think I don't know when he's going to stop. Some of it is okay. Well, he broke Bart's or he's got 6 championships or 7 now, I guess, with the
Yes. Yep, he's got 7, and I think he's tied. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think there was one more player who has 7. I believe. You would be able to correct me if I am wrong. He's not a quarterback. I know that. I believe it was a defensive player or something. I could be wrong.
Well, yeah. Well, Otto Graham played in 10 straight championship games for the Browns. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what's in Tom Brady's mind. If he's nearing like some records too. That maybe
if I'm not mistaken, he has the all-time yards record, and I believe it's the one that Drew Brees had. He broke down. I believe it was the all-time yards, and I think he's second in touchdowns all time. I believe.
Yeah, and it seems to me like he's pretty close to like a round number, like on his career passing yards, and he's the first to get to that. And maybe you got there on your computer his actual career yardage, but
yeah, I'm about to pull it up right now. So yeah. For Tom Brady, so it's yards. He leads all time. Right now he's at 81,854. So yeah, so that was one that he beat Drew Brees out for. And then for passing touchdowns, I need to bring that up. Passing TDs. Oh no, he already has that one too. Huh.
He does, but he did go over 80,000 yards this year. So maybe he was like, yeah, I want to go over 80,000, or and that might have been the round number I was thinking of.
Right.
I mean, I don't think he wants to leave a debate as to who the greatest is of all time. I always used to say it was Joe Montana, but after Brady won the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, it's really hard. It's almost impossible to debate otherwise, at least quarterbacks I've seen in my lifetime. I'm not old enough to remember Johnny Unitas. I'm not old enough to remember Sammy Baugh. I'm not old enough to remember Otto Graham. But the list keeps getting shorter and shorter of guys that you might be able to say have accomplished what Brady did.
Yeah, and I will say this, what makes Tom Brady kind of special, and why I believe he kind of can play like this, is that if you look at a guy like a Ben Roethlisberger or an Aaron Rodgers, or even a guy, heck, you can even say a Russell Wilson, they kind of do rely on their athleticism a little bit. Ben Roethlisberger, and he relied on his athleticism. When the pocket collapsed, he would bounce off of you, right? Like that is some type of athleticism. Tom Brady never really was like that. Tom Brady, him and Peyton Manning were like, we don't care. Look, bro, I could come on the field weighing 350 pounds and I will not be able to throw a lick. I'm still going to beat you, because they were cerebral. Like that's kind of what it was. Like they made themselves to be able to play a long time, And I say this, I believe Peyton Manning could have played longer if it hadn't been for the neck injury, right? Like, or if it wasn't for that, I feel like he could have. But again, we can't say that because that's now we don't know. But when you come into the league, and you're really not, you don't rely on athleticism, and you do it cerebrally, that I feel like kind of helps open the way for you, because even if your physical attributes start to go down, you can still break down a defense. You can still find the weak links. You can still find the holes. You can still, you can call all this stuff out. You can read where the blitz is coming, and then you can adjust the line. Like you can do all that stuff, which in turn will help mask some of your, some of the physical flaws that you have. So
yeah, I remember. I remember John Elway. When he was getting older, he was quoted as saying the game had slowed down for him because he could kind of anticipate more. Yep. And it's kind of like for guys, sometimes it's a nest pitcher in baseball versus a guy who's, throws gas all the time. Eventually they've got to change and they've got to become a finesse pitcher. And some of these more athletic quarterbacks that you mentioned, if they haven't gotten the cerebral skills down, maybe the game study down. Although I do believe, I think Russell Wilson could play a long time. I think Russell Wilson's a all around excellent quarterback.
Yep.
But the guys who depend more on their athleticism, they've got to adjust their game, to where they can stay in the pocket and throw.
Yeah. And, I will say this, the most dangerous type of player ever in any sport is a player who knows himself, and that's kind of what we're seeing with Tom, where he doesn't try to run out of the pocket. He doesn't try to be flashy. Tom Brady knows himself, and he just goes out and does what he does best. Same thing with Peyton Manning. I'm not, you know what I mean? Everyone kind of wants to laugh about that one trick play he did when he was in the Broncos. They were on the 1 yard line, and he kind of did the fake handoff, and he ran towards the end zone. He was wide open. And it's like, now why do you think he was wide open? Because he never runs the ball. You know what I mean? That he never does that. They know themselves. So that's, that familiarity with yourself is definitely something that, can help propel that action. I forget helping. That is propelling Tom Brady to the GOAT status and is propelling Peyton Manning to at least be in that conversation. But speaking of familiarity, the Rams that's something the Rams do not have right now at all. So they ended up having they brought Matthew Stafford in for the first year. They've been scorching hot. Him and Cooper Kupp. I made this joke before. I could have sworn Cooper Kupp played in Detroit and was traded with Matthew Stafford to the Rams. Do you believe that Matthew Stafford, in his first year with this offense, can he lead them to not only a Super Bowl appearance, but a Super Bowl victory?
That is tough to answer, because I think if the Rams win the Super Bowl, I think it's going to be more because of Aaron Donald and Von Miller. Now that they have Von Miller, Jalen Ramsey, of course, I think, but specifically Aaron Donald, I really think that if he didn't get hurt during that Packers playoff last year, the Rams could have been in the NFC Championship game if Donald could have gone full strength the whole game. Aaron Donald is one of the great defensive players of our generation, of this particular generation.
Mm-hmm.
Players like him just don't come around very often. And he is a cog that could win a title for the Rams. You might yawn when I say this because you heard it so many times. Offense wins games, defense wins championships.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the Rams win, it's going to be that. But historically, teams with quarterbacks like Kansas City, like Tampa Bay, like Green Bay, team like Pittsburgh, teams with quarterbacks who have won the Super Bowl or have been to a Super Bowl before tend to go to the Super Bowl again, and they tend to win. That's just the way it is. And I've done a couple of articles on this on the gamebeforethemoney.com, and I had pointed out the year that Mahomes, the first year Mahomes was in the AFC Championship game, were they playing the Titans, I think?
I think so.
Anyway, it was the first time since the 90s. Right? Put this into perspective. 20 years later, it was the first time since the 90s that the AFC Championship didn't involve Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, Steve McNair, and or Rich Gannon. You'd have to go all the way back to the 90s. That's just to get to the championship game.
And you said that the AFC Championship?
That's just to get to the AFC Championship game. Yeah, those 5 quarterbacks were involved in at least one of them, if not 2, because there were some Brady Manning championship games, as you remember.
Yes. Oh, I remember.
That's just to get to the AFC Championship. So it's the same thing. There've only been, I think now, 31 quarterbacks who have won the Super Bowl. It's a really low number. 30, 31, maybe 32 now.
Yeah.
But it's a lot lower than you would expect. The guys who have won Super Bowls tend to win multiple Super Bowls. And Matt Stafford, great quarterback, puts up huge stats. Hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, and until he does, I wouldn't put him above. I don't think he could beat Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady back to back. Let me put it that way. If he's got to play in a game against the Packers and then he's got to play against Tom Brady, I don't know. But the interesting thing about this year, and this is something to keep in mind as we watch the playoffs unfold, this is the first year that we have 17 regular season games.
Yes.
How is that going to affect teams as we get deeper in the playoffs and their strength? Yeah. Oh, well, and you look at the Packers. Well, if Zadarius Smith comes back, Jair Alexander, and they get some of their key players back, and they're kind of rested up, that may, I'm not saying it will, but it may give the Packers an advantage. I know Bob Greasy told me that when he came back for the Dolphins in the AFC Championship game at halftime in 1972, he felt pretty good because he hadn't been getting banged up through the rest of the year. So it could make a difference. But I think, in summary, I think if the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl, it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball.
Okay. A couple things. So first, it was the Tennessee Titans that Patrick Mahomes played in that AFC Championship game.
Okay, so that
I just wanted to make sure that we were right. But yes, it was them, and they won 35-24. When it comes to the Week 17 thing, I think it only matters for certain teams. And what I mean by that is, for instance, we're looking at the Cardinals. They're 8, right? Like they're rolling. I think if they have if their seeding is locked, I would imagine the last game of the season they bench Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, you know what I mean, or limit their touches, you know what I mean. Like that's I think it's really gonna affect the New England Patriots of the world, the Raiders of the world, those middle of the pack teams who could potentially make it as a wild card team. You know what I mean? I think that's who it's going to affect the most because those teams, they're going to need that extra week and they can't just, sit guys out. They're going to actually have to play. So I believe that's kind of who it's going to affect the most. But I could be wrong. I could be because we have seen, players, we have seen that like the New England Patriots have had the number one seed on lock and Tom Brady and Julian Edelman and Wes Welker still went out there and they still had to play. So it is a possibility, but yeah, I think it's gonna affect mostly those middle of the pack teams because the top tier teams they might be able to get away with the week, but other teams might not be able to. For instance, like right now, like the Broncos, I believe they're 5-4. The Browns are another. The Bengals, those middle of the pack teams, they're gonna have to actually kind of push and make a legit, like that week 17. They're gonna have to get the win. So that's kind of what that's my personal take on it.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. That's something to think about. It's like, okay, how much is this going to affect teams that need to be really ramped up in week 17 and they still have to get through the playoffs?
Right. So
yeah, that's a great point. One thing I think is worth mentioning that we haven't talked about though, could be a thorn in the playoffs is the Dallas Cowboys.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
You don't. I'm curious as to.
I'll be honest. The reason for me is this right now. When you put a little bit of pressure on Dallas, they shrink, and they've been doing that. Like for instance, against the Broncos, there was some pressure, and they kind of shrunk. Now they're shrinking. I don't know because against the Broncos, people are saying Dak did not look good. And when I say he didn't look good in terms of his health, they say he didn't. He really wasn't himself. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it's Mike McCarthy, who a lot of people don't think he's any better than Jason Garrett. It could be that. I don't know, but it kind of is a concern for me because, again, I understand that, the Broncos are a solid team. Don't get it twisted, but in my opinion, I don't think Dallas should not have choked that game. You know what I mean? And the reason I say choke is because they kind of came out from the beginning and they played kind of how the Bills played the Jags, where they kind of was just like, this is going to be easy. We don't care. And once you have that mentality, especially considering, the Cowboys don't have any merit. Like this roster has no merit to walk around like that. The Bills, I mean, at least they just came off an AFC championship game, but even then, the Bills definitely shouldn't be as, boisterous and say, oh yeah, we've arrived. So that's kind of my concern. And again, we've seen this story, and I'll be honest, until Jerry Jones leaves, I don't think they're gonna win another Super Bowl. Like I think he's gonna have to sell the team because he always wants to be in the mix. He always wants to be in the mix.
Yeah, those are all legit points. The one thing about the Cowboys, and I guess I am going to contradict myself a little bit with the quarterback stat. There's just something. Dak Prescott just seems to have these intangibles also, despite despite some weaknesses in his game. He's got some intangibles, and those are things that can make magic in the playoffs. And I think the team has bought into him as a leader. And I think the team has started to buy into McCarthy now that they've started to win. But again, it'd be tough if they had to play Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, if they had to play the Packers and Bucks back to back. That's not a good back-to-back matchup for anybody who gets that kind of a matchup.
I think only two teams can handle that, and it's the Cards and the Rams. I think those two teams. Now, not to say that it's going to be a cakewalk for them, but I think of all the teams, those two have the ability to withhold it or withstand it and be able to persevere. But again, like I said, with the Dallas at best and the NFC, they're the fifth best team at best. I'm not gonna take them over. Excuse me, I'm not gonna take them over the Packers. I'm not going to take them over Green Bay, or not Green Bay. They're the same team. Over the Bucks. I'm not going to take them over the Rams or the Cardinals. And also on top of that, the main reason is because if you look at all four of those teams, all four of those quarterbacks right now are better than Dak Prescott. You know what I mean? In terms of their receivers, their best receivers, you could make an argument, is better than Amari Cooper, who's right now, Dallas's number one receiver. And and all of those defenses, you could make an argument that there are better than Dallas, But again, I'm not gonna say it's impossible, because like I said, we just came off a week where the Jags beat the Bills 9-6. So I'm not gonna sit here and pretend it's impossible, because remember last year the Buccaneers were a wild card team and they was in cruise control throughout the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that is a possibility, like they say, the playoffs is like a whole nother season, and whatever you did in the regular season no longer matters, and now it's kind of like a new point, a new beginning for you to move on. So we'll see what happens, but I'll be honest, in terms of Dallas, I don't know. I mean, they'll win the division, which again I didn't see coming. I thought the Giants were going to win the division, and then the Giants thought it was a good idea to pick up Jason Garrett, which I was like, okay, it is what it is, but here we are.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think we're going to get a clearer picture, around week 16 and week 17, and
Yes.
see what teams have the momentum. But really, again, I brought up the Cowboys because I think Dak, his intangibles are very interesting, and they could create some sort of magic. But at the end of the day, if you're going to lay your cards on the table, you're going to want to go with experienced quarterbacks and experienced coaches who have won in those situations. And realistically, it's fun. It's a lot of fun to talk about these other teams, but it's probably going to come down, historically points to, it's probably going to come down to Tampa Bay, Green Bay, Kansas City, maybe Buffalo, maybe the Titans will sneak in there, and maybe the Rams, because their defense, up in with Von Miller, great move.
Oh, it was a phenomenal move. And it's kind of funny because we're talking about defensively, but offensively, they just got OBJ. And it's kind of fun. I made this joke, and I was like, we probably the NFL needs to investigate this front office, because they got Von Miller and OBJ in a week. Something's not adding up. Like, there's a part of this equation that makes no sense. But here's the question. Putting OBJ in this offense, a lot of people are saying that this is a recipe for disaster. Do you believe that this will work out?
I do. I don't think, any team adding Odell Beckham is going to be worse than what they were before. I know he's got that history before the game, that famous incident before the playoff game against Green Bay where he jetted off and had a party. But Beckham's a great player. You and I were talking about this before, and we were both kind of talking about that, we wouldn't be surprised if he's there to fill the role that just Deshaun Jackson had, and just be a veteran leader. Because the Rams, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson's coming on. They've got a top 3 core right there. And look, if OBJ ends up making a couple of plays down the stretch, and he's a guy that can turn to in the locker room, I think the Rams are golden in that deal.
Yeah, and my thing is, I understand the perception about him, and I get it. I understand, he's looked at as a malcontent. But here's my thing: I don't think it's bad. I do think it's a risk, but I don't think it's bad because you know we need to understand his first year with Cleveland, he kept his mouth shut because they were winning. You know what I mean? Like now that they were kind of losing and he wasn't, getting the touches he felt he needed, that's kind of the thing. However, I will say this. This I feel like this is a better situation for Odell because Sean McVay let him know what it was. And also it's also coming out that I guess he FaceTimed Jalen Ramsey asking him, do you really think it'll be a good idea if I go there? Jalen Ramsey told him to hold on, went to the wide receivers room. I'm talking about with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. They went there, put them on the phone and said, ask again. And Odell was like, do you think I'd fit there? And they didn't say yes. They didn't say no. They just told them, just come on. And I feel like that's, when everyone is on the same page, I feel like it'll be more likely to work. Now, it is still a risk because you never know. However, at the same time, you didn't trade anything for him. It's really, you're not paying him an exorbitant amount. And at the end of the day, he can, you only have him for the rest of this year. So if it doesn't work out, Odell would just be like, look, at the end of this year, I can just go. It is what it is. And also, he's going to a better team with the best quarterback he's ever played with in his career. This is the best team he's ever been on with the best quarterback he's ever been on. So it's kind of like, maybe this could work. I genuinely believe it can. Now, obviously, it's going to be interesting because the Cooper Kupp is a clear number one. But it's going to be interesting. Is Odell going to be the number two? Or is he going to take a backseat to Robert Woods and be the number three? That's kind of the question that a lot of people have. So I'm going to basically throw that question to you. Where do you think Odell's going to fit in this offense?
Well, again, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes on Deshaun Jackson's role and doesn't really factor in that much, or they design specific plays for him, maybe 3-4 a game, where he's got a chance to make a play. Maybe they do one of those things where they just throw the ball on the line of scrimmage to him and Odell, see if you can make a play. That kind of thing. So look, he's not going to come in to be a game changer because they're already a high potent offense. But he just brings another dynamic wherever he's going to go. Yes. And I'm saying that as a playmaker. I'm not saying that, I'm not 100% sold that the quote unquote image of Odell is the same that his teammates for him feel for him. I mean, there's a difference between being who you are on social media and being who you are in the locker room. He was from what I can tell, he was a popular player with his Giants teammates for a long time. All teams have different cultures. And it's kind of like where you work. Sometimes you fit into a different office environment better than you do another office environment. Just like we as regular people not playing in the NFL. The NFL locker rooms are the same way, and personalities will fit in better in different teams. Maybe he'll fit in great with that, and it's going to be exciting to watch, though. Like you said, picking up Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, geez, that's a big plus right there.
Yeah, it definitely is, and obviously we'll see whether time will tell. It is interesting because Von Miller is a guy who does have a ring, and not only does that, he still can play at a high level. So it's going to be interesting to see how I believe he's going to fit perfectly with that offense. I believe he's very intelligent. So when he says stuff, obviously the defense, they're going to listen to him and all that stuff. Offensively, even if Odell doesn't work, they can just bench him and they still got something. So I feel like, the Rams are in a place where they're, they're there. They're contending. And you definitely can't disrespect them at all. Thank you, of course, to wrap it up. Thank you for being here. Do you have any last comments at all?
Not really. Just thank you for having me. It's really enjoyed being on the show and really enjoyed chatting football. And yeah, definitely the Rams are a team to watch for sure. And I'd invite people to please check out my website, thegamebeforethemoney.com, and you can a lot of great football history articles on there. And sometimes I put in football past meets present category. So that's where I talk about some of the more recent that you and I talked about.
Right. So obviously the gamebeforethemoney.com, correct?
Yes.
So feel free, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, check it out. If you enjoyed anything he said, it was fun. I enjoyed it, being able to talk not only present day, but it is fun to take a time machine back and to hear some perspectives from back then, because we tend to forget that the history of the NFL is long and rich. You know what I mean? Like, people are accustomed to when you talk about it, you only talk about the big names. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of other guys kind of tend to get forgotten. So it was fun having you here, and you're always welcome. Always welcome. Whenever you want to be on, feel free. Just let me know. I'll be more than happy to definitely have you on.
Oh yeah, well I'd love to check in again right around the time the playoffs start, and we can predict what's going to go down once that playoff picture becomes clear.
100%. Yeah. When I'll have you either here week 16. If everything is solidified week 16, I'll have you here then. If there's still some bugs to be figured out, then I'll have you right after week 17. So that way we can look to see the grand picture. We even come up with some brackets to see how we think it's all going to go down.
Oh yeah.
So that way we can have a little bit of fun with it. As always, follow us on Twitter at Prideful Take. We not only do we have breaking news, but I love arguing with people. That's kind of like my thing. I love arguing with people, like, especially when they block you afterwards. Oh, it's hilarious. Catch us on Facebook at Prideful Takes. We go live on Facebook. We also have news, memes, and also the NFL pick'ems. And I'm gonna start doing NBA pick'ems. I was gonna start doing it, but then I completely got nervous because, if it was up to me, my Celtics right now would be undefeated. We're kind of down bad right now, so I kind of been avoiding it just a little bit, but I'm gonna have to hop back on that. And if you guys don't have Facebook, we're on YouTube at Prideful Takes. Visit our website, www.pridefultake.com. Not only is every episode of the podcast there, but we also have original articles, and also catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Prideful Takes Podcast. Jackson, it's been an honor. It's been a privilege. And like I said, week 16 or 17, once the entire NFL playoff picture is solidified, I'm gonna have you here, and we're gonna make brackets on how.
All right, man. I'm looking forward to that.
It's gonna be NFC and AFC, right? We're gonna have two separate brackets, and then it's gonna be the big crescendo. As a matter of fact, that's gonna be the whole show. The whole show is gonna be our brackets, and we're gonna break down every game. Like every game that we have on
and you can break down potential matchups, and it'll be a blast.
It definitely will be a blast. It's like always, pride on behalf of Jackson. Appreciate you guys being with here, and we'll see you on the next one. And Jackson, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rayleigh. Back at you.
That was
Have a good one.
That was a great read. Oh, Lillard from the logo. That'll quiet the 2 on the season. 2nd and 1 for the Bills. They handle the rush. Allen looking. End zone!
To Shohei Ohtani. Center field. Let's watch it go. Did several of those inside low kicks.